Welcome to Let's Talk Democracy. I'm Tina Johnson, your host. Join me as we talk to the people on the front lines, the change makers and activists who are building a stronger, healthier democracy for all of us. Whether you're looking for expert advice, a new perspective, or just a little inspiration, this is where you'll find it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 finale of Let's Talk Democracy, Keeping Democracy Alive. For this final episode, I asked listeners to send in your questions. The things that stuck with you, challenged you, or left you thinking long after an episode ended. Looking through your questions, it became clear that the themes of this season, fear, participation, trust, and the future of democracy, are exactly what we need to reflect on as we close out 2025. So today, I'm responding to 8 of your questions. We'll look back at what we've explored this season, and we'll also think about how we can all stay engaged and keep democracy alive in the year ahead. And I'll admit, as I was preparing for this episode, I found myself jotting down notes and reflecting on the conversations, the news reports I have seen, or the articles I have read that got me thinking about how democracy shows up in everyday life. And that how small moments help to remind me why this work matters. It's not just policy, it's the way people experience and connect with the world around them. Let's get into it. This was far and away the most common question. After everything discussed this season, how worried should we be about the future of democracy? And I would respond by saying concern is justified, but despair isn't productive. Across the season, we looked at democratic backsliding, misinformation, and declining trust in institutions. Those trends are real, and they're supported by research from many different countries. But what's also clear is that democracy rarely collapses suddenly. More often, it weakens gradually, especially when people disengage or feel powerless. Being worried can be useful if it leads to awareness and participation. The danger isn't concern, it's resignation. And I'll share a small moment. While I was reading through listener emails last week, one message really stood out. It was from someone who said they felt overwhelmed but curious. That struck me. Curiosity, even amid worry, is exactly the mindset that keeps democracy alive. So stay curious, even when you're worried. Stay curious. I wanted to follow that with a question about hope, because we can't talk about democracy honestly without it. What gives you hope right now when it comes to democracy? What gives me hope is continued engagement, even when it's imperfect. Throughout the season, many listeners shared that they were trying to understand issues more deeply, even when it felt overwhelming or confusing. That effort matters. I also found hope in casual conversations with friends or people that I've just met when we're talking about civic issues, but we're coming from a place of curiosity rather than frustration. And it helped to remind me that engagement often happens in small, everyday moments, not just in headlines, but in those conversations that you're having about the things that you're thinking about or curious about or wondering about when it comes to the way the world around you is functioning. Democracy doesn't depend on people having all the answers. It depends on people staying curious and willing to participate. So I would say that the end of the year mantra or saying is to stay curious, to stay curious. This next question connects to several big themes from the season. Why does fear-based political messaging work so well, even when the facts don't support it? Simply put, because fear simplifies complex realities. Research consistently shows that emotional messages travel faster than factual ones. And we've heard that from some of our guests on this podcast as well. The digital space is where we most often see this emotional messaging having its greatest impact. Fear-based messaging offers clarity, often by creating a sense of threat or identifying someone to blame, from immigrants to people from different neighborhoods of cultures. By contrast, facts tend to raise more questions and require more effort to process. Understanding this helps explain why misinformation spreads so effectively and why countering it requires more than just presenting correct information. I'll admit that sometimes when I see something across my social media feed that I know is not based in facts and that it is misinformation, I get frustrated. But then I take a breath and I think to myself, okay, how do I become proactive in sharing information that isn't based on misinformation around a particular policy issue or even a cultural issue? And what I've chosen to do is to find the information and to share it with the person who has shared the misinformation, not in an accusatory way, but in a saying, hey, have you seen this? And sometimes they respond and go, no, I haven't. And sometimes they're not interested, but feeding in new information, new input in hopes that they'll read it and perhaps say, oh, yeah, that's something that makes more sense. Or, yeah, that's something I can put into my head and consider as I'm thinking through the things that I'm taking in. It helps to create awareness, and creating that awareness is key in combating misinformation. It's a lot of work, I know. Try to support that work, that awareness by responding. I usually do it with people in my own family where I feel that I have some possibility of engaging them and thinking about something from a different perspective. Not always true, but sometimes. A lot of you asked some version of this next question. How much responsibility do media and online platforms have in protecting democracy? I would say that they have significant responsibility, particularly because they influence what people see repeatedly. Media systems and algorithms, they prioritize engagement, and engagement often comes from outrage or conflict. There's the saying, if it bleeds, it leads. It's the same on social media. The more outrageous, the more incendiary it is, the more people click on it, the more people engage with it. However, over time, that can distort public perception and make extreme views appear more common than they actually are. So at the same time, democracy also relies on public judgment. This goes back to what I was saying in the question before. Media literacy, critical thinking, and deliberate consumption of information all play a role in shaping a healthier democratic environment. So those of us who are doing that, who are media literate, are critical thinkers, are deliberately consuming information, we can turn the tide by sharing the things that we've learned or that we know in these spaces as well. So there is some responsibility that we have to help media systems be more accountable to us, the end user of the services that they're providing. We spent a lot of time this season talking about polls, so I wanted to revisit that. Do polls measure public opinion or do they shape it? They do both. Polls can provide useful insight into public attitudes, but they can also influence expectations about who is likely to win or which opinions are considered mainstream. When polls are framed as predictions rather than snapshots, they can discourage participation or create false certainty. Polls are tools, not outcomes. Democratic participation still matters regardless of polling data. So vote, engage, because it's not over till the last ballot is counted. It's not over till the polls have closed. It's not over until voters have their say. Polls are a snapshot, and they are not the predictors of election outcomes in most democratic systems. This question gets to the emotional heart of democracy. Why do people sometimes vote against their own interest? Because political decisions aren't based on policy alone. Studies of voter behavior show that identity, emotion, and trust often matter as much or more than material interests. People vote in ways that align with how they see themselves and where they feel they belong. In the US, you hear Trump supporters or folks in the MAGA world saying America first or we will not be replaced. This idea somehow that their vote is aligning with how they see themselves in the way that the world is being constructed for them. So whether it's misinformation or in their media bubble. So recognizing this doesn't mean that we agree with every choice, but it does help explain why purely policy-based arguments often fall short. If you can't get to the heart of what people are feeling when they go to the polls to vote or that they engage in supporting a political party, then we really can't find ways to understand how to engage and have conversations that would open up the dialogue enough that perhaps new perspectives, new information can come in and help shape or disrupt the bubble that they're in so that they can be more informed or at least be aware that there's more information out there that they could be using. The next one came up again and again. When does staying silent become a political choice? And from my answers previously to some of these questions, I'm saying silence becomes a political choice when it consistently avoids engagement with issues that affect others. Not everyone participates in the same way, and that's important to acknowledge, but widespread disengagement shifts influence towards those who are most motivated or most extreme. So by us not engaging, we're saying, here's the space that you can fill up with your extreme views because I don't want to engage. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be frustrated. Democracy relies on a range of voices, not just the loudest ones. So we need to fill in that space. We need to go in and engage. It's very important to balance out the ideas around how society works. Participation can be quiet, local, or incremental, whether you're doing it at a dinner table, which during the holiday seasons, I'm sure many people are avoiding these conversations. We can all be a part of creating more space for more information, more perspectives is really helpful. So silence is a political choice. It doesn't mean that by being silent that we don't have a responsibility. I wanted to end with something practical. What's one realistic thing everyday people can do to strengthen democracy right now? I've said this before. I'll say it again because it's important. Have informed, respectful conversations, especially across disagreement. I'll say it again. Have informed, respectful conversations, especially across disagreement. Democratic societies depend on shared understanding. Even when consensus isn't possible, it is not necessary that we all agree, but it is important that we have understanding of what it is that we think or that we disagree about. Asking questions, listening carefully, and resisting the urge to immediately persuade can lower polarization and build trust over time. Nobody wants to be forced into taking on someone else's opinion. We're all stubborn. We all have our way of thinking. But when we take out this need to win an argument or to be right in an argument, and we replace it with asking questions, listening carefully, we open up the space to build trust over time through the relationships. So democracy is strengthened through relationships, not just institutions. Democracy is strengthened through relationships, not institutions. I think that is something that is lacking oftentimes, because the most powerful, transformative work in any society comes from the relationships that people have with one another. A friend of mine who works in the peace building world talks about her work in Rwanda and the reconciliation process that they've done there. And although it's institutions that were managing or creating the space and providing the funding, it was the community designing the process that would allow for them to reconcile with one another, because they wanted to be in community with one another. They wanted to strengthen those relationships that had been destroyed by the genocide in Rwanda. Through this healing process, which is ongoing, could happen, but it was because of the relationships that were being built through the stewardship of the community members who understood the need that they had to one another and for one another to be able to move forward after the genocide. So season 2 has focused on the challenges democracy faces, from fear and misinformation to disengagement. But it has also reminded us of the power of everyday choices. Democracy isn't just about elections or protest. It lives in our attention, our conversations, and our willingness to stay involved, even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you for listening, for thinking critically, and for being part of this season of Let's Talk Democracy. I hope that the final days of 2025 are wonderful for you and that the new year is full of positivity and hope. Let's Talk Democracy will be back on January 20th, 2026, with a deeper dive into the role of social media and technology and how it shapes democratic values and principles. Let's keep the conversation going. I'll talk with you soon.